You probably already know that hormones matter. What you might not know is how profoundly, quietly, and constantly they're shaping almost every dimension of your life. Your energy levels when you wake up, your threshold for stress, your desire to pursue things, your mood at 3 p.m. on a Tuesday, your relationship to risk. And yet most of us are operating with a completely passive relationship to these systems. We just live with whatever our bodies are producing and hope for the best. Today we're going to change that because there are things you can start doing, actual behaviors, not pills, not injections, that can meaningfully shift the output of your hormonal system. And we're going to start with some context that I think is genuinely worth paying attention to. Between 1999 and 2016, average testosterone levels in young American men dropped from roughly 605 nanograms per deciliter to around 451, a decline of nearly 25%. That's not older men. That's young men, teens and adults in their 20s and 30s. And critically, even when researchers accounted for BMI, men with completely normal body weight still showed a roughly 20% decline in testosterone across that same period. So it isn't just a weight problem. Something larger is happening. And while the full picture is still being researched, the available data point to a combination of environmental toxins, sleep disruption, reduced physical activity, and chronic low-grade inflammation as major contributors. A 2024 Harvard study combining data from over 24,000 men found that low testosterone was associated with significantly higher rates of death from any cause, and specifically from cardiovascular-related causes. That context matters, because this isn't a conversation about vanity, it's a conversation about vitality. Now let's talk about what these hormones actually do, because it's almost certainly more than you think. Testosterone and estrogen are what biologists call sex steroid hormones, and one of the first things worth understanding is that everyone makes both. This isn't a testosterone for men, estrogen for women situation. It's about ratios, and those ratios, depending on where they sit, have a profound influence on your anxiety levels, your libido, your drive to compete and pursue things, your bone density, your mood, and your capacity to build and maintain muscle. These molecules are not peripheral to your life. They're central to it. Here's something that trips people up when they first hear it. Testosterone itself, in males, doesn't directly drive libido through testosterone alone. It's estrogen, specifically estrogen derived from testosterone through a conversion process, that you also need. If estrogen drops too low in a male, libido essentially disappears, regardless of how much testosterone is circulating. And in females, testosterone peaks right before ovulation, and that's the hormonal reason why desire intensifies at that particular point in the cycle. The molecule driving the seeking of sex is testosterone across all sexes. The molecule enabling receptivity is estrogen. They're not competing, they're coordinating. There's also a fascinating relationship between testosterone and the amygdala, the threat detection center of your brain. Testosterone binds to the amygdala and shifts the threshold for what registers as dangerous or anxiety-inducing. It doesn't make you reckless, it reduces the signal strength of stress. It makes effort feel more worth it. Which is why adequate testosterone levels don't just affect the gym, they affect everything requiring willingness to push through resistance. Work, relationships, creative risk, the willingness to start something without a guarantee. Now, one of the more counterintuitive things the science tells us about competition, it doesn't matter whether you win or lose in the short term, because just the act of competing increases testosterone. Winning adds dopamine, which then has downstream effects on testosterone later. But the immediate hormonal response to entering a competition, to signing up, to challenging yourself, is already working in your favor. That's not motivational rhetoric. That's documented physiology. So what can you actually do? Let's start with the most overlooked lever in this entire system, which is breathing. Not meditation breathing, not stress breathing, just your default everyday breathing pattern. Sleep apnea, meaning repeated cessation of breathing during sleep, is one of the most well-documented disruptors of sex steroid hormones in the entire scientific literature. Multiple quality studies have found that when apnea is reduced or eliminated, testosterone in males increases significantly, and proper estrogen to testosterone ratios in females improve. The mechanism runs through cortisol, Breath holding during sleep causes carbon dioxide to build up, which spikes cortisol, and cortisol and testosterone compete for the same precursor molecule, cholesterol. When cortisol goes up, testosterone and estrogen production go down. It's a resource competition happening inside you while you sleep. The practical intervention isn't complicated. If you breathe through your mouth, especially at night, that's a problem worth solving. Nasal breathing during waking hours, including during exercise unless you're at maximum effort, dilates the sinus passages over time and conditions the system. There's research showing that consistent nasal breathing during cardiovascular exercise improves gas exchange, reduces carbon dioxide buildup, and over time helps eliminate the apneic breathing patterns that tank your hormone production in sleep. For people with severe apnea, a CPAP machine is the appropriate intervention. For others, simply becoming a dedicated nasal breather during the day and, if needed, using light tape over the lips during sleep, the kind that releases easily, can meaningfully shift nighttime breathing patterns. It sounds too simple to be real. The science says otherwise. The second lever is light, and I mean this literally, not metaphorically. The relationship between light exposure, dopamine, and sex steroid hormones is direct and well established. Dopamine is the precursor in the pathway that stimulates the release of the hormones, luteinizing hormone and follicle-stimulating hormone, that tell the gonads to produce testosterone and estrogen. And one of the most powerful natural drivers of dopamine is morning sunlight entering the eyes. Getting somewhere between 2 and 10 minutes of bright outdoor light into your eyes within the first hour of waking doesn't just set your circadian clock. It triggers a dopamine cascade that has downstream effects on your hormone production throughout the day. This is why seasonal animals breed more in long-day high-light conditions. Dopamine levels rise, and the sex steroid hormone axis follows. The same biology lives in you. The flip side of this is equally important. Bright light exposure between roughly 10 at night and 4 in the morning actively suppresses dopamine. 2 studies published in high-tier cell-press journals confirm that nighttime light exposure has a measurable detrimental effect on dopamine and therefore on testosterone and estrogen levels. The phone on your nightstand, the TV at midnight, the bright bathroom light, these are not neutral. They are actively disrupting a hormonal cascade that takes all night to complete. Getting bright light early and avoiding it late isn't just a sleep hygiene tip. It's a direct hormonal intervention. The third lever is exercise, and the specificity here matters. Heavy resistance training, working in roughly the 1 to 8 repetition range at high intensity, but not to the point where you can't complete the movement, has the strongest scientific support for increasing testosterone. The mechanism appears to involve the recruitment of high-threshold motor units, which are the large muscle fibers that require substantial neural output to activate. The nervous system's engagement of these fibers appears to trigger a feedback signal that stimulates hormonal release. Training to complete failure, interestingly, seems to blunt this response, likely because of the cortisol spike that accompanies it. The takeaway: train heavy, train hard, but stop while you can still control the movement. If you combine resistance and endurance training in the same session, the order matters. Weight training first, followed by cardiovascular work, preserves the hormonal response from the lifting. Doing cardio first appears to reduce testosterone during the subsequent weight session. An endurance exercise extending beyond about 75 minutes, particularly at high intensity, begins to produce cortisol elevations that suppress testosterone, which is one reason some endurance athletes seek external hormonal support. Now let's briefly address 2 specific populations because the questions come up a lot. For women approaching or experiencing menopause, the reduction in estrogen that comes with the depletion of eggs in the ovaries, the behavioral tools above remain foundational. Beyond those, the research-backed supplemental landscape includes a few notable compounds. Black cohosh shows consistent but modest pro-estrogenic effects across multiple double-blind studies conducted on women 45 to 64. Panax ginseng shows some libido-related improvements. And a compound called Pararia mirifica, also called quao crua cow, shows effects in 4 separate studies that researchers describe as comparable to conventional estrogen replacement therapy in reducing menopausal symptoms. That's a striking finding. It warrants a conversation with your doctor, particularly if there's any personal or family history of estrogen-sensitive cancers, but it's worth knowing it exists. For anyone looking to support baseline testosterone, the research consistently identifies 3 nutrients whose deficiency directly suppresses the hormone axis: vitamin D3, zinc, and magnesium. These aren't glamorous. They're not the kind of thing that goes viral on social media. But the evidence for their role in supporting normal testosterone and estrogen production is solid, and deficiency in any of them is measurably correlated with lower hormone levels. A blood panel can tell you whether you're actually deficient, which is the only sensible way to approach supplementation. 2 more things worth flagging. First, the supplement creatine, which is widely used and generally well studied for strength and muscle outcomes, does appear to increase an enzyme called 5-alpha reductase, which converts testosterone into DHT, the more potent androgen involved in hair follicle sensitivity, beard growth, and libido. Whether that's a benefit or a complication depends on your individual situation. If hair thinning is a concern, it's something to be aware of. Second, a compound called tongkat, or Uricoma longifolia, has peer-reviewed support for modestly freeing up bound testosterone by reducing the grip of sex hormone-binding globulin. This isn't about producing more testosterone. It's about making more of what you already have bioavailable. Effective range in studies appears to be in the 400 to 800 milligram range, and the main reported side effect is excessive alertness if taken late in the day, which is perhaps not the worst problem in the world. One thing I want to be clear about before we close: more of these hormones is not inherently better. The tissues that produce testosterone and estrogen, the testes, the ovaries, are precisely the tissues most vulnerable to hormone-sensitive tumors. The goal is optimization of ratio and production within your natural range, not maximum output. That distinction is important, and it's why working with a physician and getting periodic blood work is not optional if you're actively trying to shift these systems. You need data, not guesses. The practical framework for everything we've covered today comes down to 4 questions you can start asking yourself. Are you nasal breathing, especially in sleep? Are you getting morning light and avoiding artificial light late at night? Are you doing some form of resistance training with heavy loads? And are you competing with ideas, with projects, with yourself regularly enough that your system stays activated? Those 4 habits, consistently maintained, will do more for your hormonal baseline than most supplements on the market. Not because they're magic, but because they're what your biology was designed to respond to. Before our next episode, here's your challenge. For 1 week, commit to nasal breathing during every workout, no matter how uncomfortable it feels at first. Log what changes in energy, sleep quality, recovery, or mood. Then drop your report in the comments. I want to build a real data set from this community. If enough of you do it, we'll revisit the results on a future episode. Because science shouldn't just happen in labs, it should happen in your actual life. Growth is not accidental, it's intentional. If you're ready to build a better version of yourself, welcome. Stay tuned.